Okay, everyone, welcome back to Expansion. Thank you so much for coming back and listening to another episode. Or if you're brand new to this podcast, welcome. Great to have all the listeners here. I'm really excited today. Often I'll talk a little bit about my field, which is the field of Ayurvedic medicine. It's an ancient science from India. It's over 3,000 years old, and I often will bring that into the podcast. But because we have such a special guest today, we'll actually be spending most of our time talking with her. This woman, her name is Mary Rodwell. She is a hypnotherapist, but so interesting, her work. She actually works with her patients to help them recover their experiences with extraterrestrial, extra-dimensional beings, any kind of experiences that they may have half memories of. She, from my understanding, she also started her career as a birth midwife, and through her years, she has also worked a lot with children, helping children to speak about their experiences. So we're going to learn a lot from Mary today about her work, how she works with children today, how she works in the field of basically creating a bigger awareness of the expansion of consciousness in our cultures today. It's just a very exciting time. So Mary, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Elaine, it's an absolute pleasure to be able to talk with you today and share a little bit of my perspective on, these, what I call multidimensional experiences that are all to do with human consciousness.
Yes. Thank you so much. I first heard about your work actually just through YouTube. You had given several presentations about your work, and I thought that one thing that attracted me to your work was that, well, one, you're very positive with your intentions, working both with adults and children and helping them to be supported through their expanding consciousness. But also your involvement with the format of doing research and looking into research, using a scientific model. So maybe we could start there with your work with the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, the free organization. Would you like to speak just a little bit about that organization and what is the current work you're doing with that organization?
I'm extremely grateful as one of the co-founders with Dr. Edgar Mitchell, who, was kind enough to give his name to the foundation, along with Dr. Rudy Shield, who's an astrophysicist, Ray Hernandez, who's an attorney who's had his own extraordinary experiences, and really combined what we wanted to do and what the mandate is to bring the science to understanding these experiences so people can feel less like they're crazy, less like this is too hard for most people to understand. And we've all been programmed into 3D. And, 3D says, if you can't touch it, feel it, see it, smell it, then it's not real. But science now is broadening its perspective into the non-physical world and helping us to perhaps get some kind of way of managing these experiences through the scientific model, through the quantum hologram or the unified field theory. And Dr. Rudy Shield is in the forefront of that. So some of our directors are physicists. We've got a neuroscientist who is chairing the study that we're doing, Dr. Bob Davis, who's written a book on UFOs, but also on the afterlife as well. So we've got very open-minded, but very positive and academic side to this through doing the surveys, which we want to bring into mainstream. And the only way we're going to do that is to play that 3D game, if you like, and bring it in, and make a model that everyone can understand or work from, so that we can start to understand these other experiences. And through the 4,000 surveys The 4,000 have done our survey in English, although we've got it in several other languages like Spanish as well, and other languages. What we're really doing is trying to get a global perspective on this, but 600 in-depth questions, and some of the results have been astounding, because for many people, they see this experience of non-human contact, extraterrestrials, whether you call them the visitors, star people, or whatever. The wonderful thing has been, and you talk about my positive take, it is only because we've discovered that a majority, from almost 80% have found this experience, once they've come to understand it, absolutely spiritually transformative. In so many ways, it's changed their lives for the better. And that's what we are finding, which is quite astounding.
Yes, I know. It's very exciting. And I do enjoy the idea that this is a collaboration. It's a collaborative approach of very brilliant minds, actually doing so much more good as opposed to people working on an individual basis, although that can happen as well. But to get people, scientists that have their own specialties, and then yourself who also works in the healing and health field, it's very important to see that kind of collaboration. And so that kind of brings me into the idea of your work as a hypnotist. If we could talk just a little bit about that. It seems like some people have had encounters, at least when they're initially beginning to recall their encounters with other beings. What you alluded to earlier is there can be a lot of fear at first. So then those experiences could be considered, at least for a certain amount of time, more negatively based. Because if you think about it, if a person is encountering a being they've never seen before, it can, of course, bring up your survival instinct, and fight or flight can kick in. But your experience as a hypnotist, so when you work with your clients, you are helping them to recover or uncover more details of these subtle memories or half memories that they're having. Is that correct?
Yes, Chilin. The important thing to say here is I'm a therapist first before I'm a researcher.
Right.
My work has always been, when someone comes with any kind of experience, whether it's a more, what we consider a more human relationship issue, or something that's more paranormal or anomalous, the important thing for me is to find a way to help them understand, from whatever level is useful to them, what's actually going on. And if that includes doing some trance work with hypnosis, I have found it quite astounding how much the person can get an understanding through going in that direction. And there's a lot of misconceptions about hypnosis, and really all it is that you're going into a more relaxed state. And we go into relaxed state all the time when we're watching television, driving the car or whatever. We'll go into an altered state. So there's nothing magical about it, but what it does do, it allows the subconscious, that doesn't edit out things that that the left brain thinks are not okay. It allows that information to be available to the individual. And you're quite right. The problem is, initially, many people are absolutely traumatized by the awareness that they're being taken somewhere, and often at night as well as in the day. They don't know what's happening. They don't know why these beings are doing it. But a lot of them don't even believe in extraterrestrials, for a start. So to think that they're having these experiences, many think they're going crazy, and and they want to know whether they are, and who do they go to, what do they do about the fear, how can they talk about this to their family. Some of the family don't want to hear about it because it scares them.
Sure.
So, that's my first book, Awakening, was really a therapeutic process book for those with experiences, answering all the questions. How do I know I'm not crazy? What do I do about the fear? What about implants, missing pregnancy? All those kinds of things, I covered, so that it gave people, if you like, a workbook or a manual to work from, so they could start to realize and understand what's going on here. And the more informed they are, the less frightened they are, because once you've got an understanding of why things happen and not just that they're happening, things can change. It's like anything, when you understand what's behind something, then you can start to deal with it, integrate it, and heal.
Yes, that's such a good point. And I do appreciate that you're sort of really at the forefront, kind of at the frontier of working very therapeutically with people to help them navigate through these experiences that otherwise are being labeled as crazy. And I think that that's a big stigma that needs to be removed. So thank you for that. And I do have a question about, from your experience doing these regressions with your clients, what have you observed in terms of any changes or types of healing? I know we talked about removing the fear factor, which is enormous in of itself. But have you observed any changes or heard back from your clients about any physical, mental, emotional changes that have occurred from them other than removing the fear?
Absolutely. And that's one of the fascinating things with the survey that we did, was there are things about the experience that many of the public are not aware of. For example, when you can take somebody into that space and they can revisit that experience, one of the important things to say is that often these interactions have happened even as a small child that they may or may not have been aware of. That's one of the things that often is uncovered, for example. So this is often a lifelong kind of experience. And when you take them into the experience, they may find that some of the procedures, although genetic material is taken, they're often having healing procedures as well. 40% of those surveyed out of the nearly 4,000 had healing experiences, profound healing experiences on board craft. They learned that they also got taught things on board craft and taken to other places, for example. So those are the kinds of things. But the most fascinating is how it changes them. And we talk about this psycho-spiritual transformation where their intuitive abilities start to be accelerated and expanded, such as clairvoyance, clairaudience, precognition, seeing future events, healing abilities, being aware of seeing energy fields, spirits. So their multidimensional awareness is expanded in ways that also make them feel more connected to the planet, to all living things. They often change their diet. They change the way they want to live. They lose interest in materialism. They want to be more holistic in their lives and more spiritual. So this transformation is a direct result from these experiences. And that's what a lot of people don't know, that, there are a percentage that are still in fear, that have been highly traumatized, that haven't got to that kind of place. But some of those are not necessarily related to their extraterrestrial encounters, but to something called a human abduction, where it emulates the T1. And those are the most traumatized, and that's because there's something else going on, which isn't necessarily extraterrestrial at all.
Right. Are you referring to the MILABs, military type of abduction, or something else?
I am referring to the MILAB, which most of the public are not aware of. Unfortunately, the public generally are uninformed. There is a truth embargo on this. But yes, the MILAB now, they do have what we call program life forms that look like greys, look like reptilians, that they use as this pseudo-abduction. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that, all the extraterrestrials are necessarily benevolent, because none of us absolutely know for certain anything, because we don't have the data. But it's quite fascinating that out of the nearly 4,000 people surveyed, that the ones that had the negative kinds of experiences were like 15-20% against nearly 85% of those that were either neutral or finding it absolutely positive, which is astounding.
It is. It absolutely is. It's very, very encouraging, actually, and very important data to be collecting. Your work, the work that you do with your clients, really fascinates me for many reasons. And one reason is, in the field of Ayurvedic medicine, we have an understanding that disease occurs when we forget our true nature as connected to spirit. So in essence, as connected to everything else. Basically, we're all one. And what I see with your work is that you are actually helping the older generations, of which I am a part, to remember. And so helping people to connect to these massive points in their lives that they have, for many different reasons, have forgotten. And so let's bring in the work that you're doing. I would like to kind of discern between the older generations and the children coming in. In your new book, which I read voraciously, it's called The New Human, and it just came out maybe about 2 months ago or so. Is that correct, Mary?
Well, it came out in January of this year, actually.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, so perhaps it was when I read it. I think I read it about 2 months ago. And in your introduction, you're talking about the new generations of children, and I just want to read just one sentence that you wrote about. You first were talking about the limitations that we have, the older generations have, due to our programming in this 3D matrix. So I'm just going to quote you here, quote, "The new generations of children, however, do not appear to have these limitations and appear to be born in such a way that they are less likely to succumb to the old programs and 3D conditioning. It suggests that they can retain their multidimensional understanding and awareness for longer." So that reminds me of the importance of remembering. And so is this what you have observed with the children, that they're remembering their true nature?
Absolutely. What has been quite profound for me, and the validation of that from, in the book, there are 2 molecular biologists that are actually talking about this and confirming what I'd suspected. Because what I noticed was that those who had encounters, it goes through the intergenerational DNA link. So that if you've got an individual that's having experiences, you will find one or both parents, grandparents, etc., and the grandchildren. But what was fascinating to me was that each generation seemed to be that little bit more conscious, that little bit more aware of their multidimensional abilities. And their, if you like, the access to that higher awareness that they had. But Dr. William Brown is one that I quote because he's a molecular biologist, and he told me in an email in 2010 and confirmed for me something that I'd already suspected. And he said this: "I believe that genetic modification is occurring right now in utero and is actually producing a new human. This is shown by the exponential increase in autistic, ADD, and indigo children. Their new genetic architecture allows them to see the world in a multidimensional fashion." And he says that he believed research would show dormant genetic regions are being integrated into the biological system, and this is occurring in all of us to produce expanded awareness. So in that, he's encapsulated the new human, or the new versions of human coming in. Many of them are labeled because they appear to be dysfunctional, when in fact what I believe is happening there is that we're not understanding the way that they are interpreting their reality, and that for them 3D is a limited box that they don't experience. They're experiencing, so it's almost like the older versions of human are looking through one eye, but these children are looking through both eyes, and they can see so much more than we can. It confuses them because we're saying, oh no, reality is just through that one eye. Whereas they're saying, but actually that's not what we're seeing. And so it's very hard for them to appreciate or be put into that box. And we see that as a problem, because we're saying, well, there's something wrong with you, but actually there's something wrong with us because we are the limited ones. We are the ones that are dysfunctional because we have been shut down and we've been programmed out of our awareness through the 3D programming that we have at school. As one 9-year-old called Kathy from Europe said, when you go to school, the teachers program you out of your light, and she said, and they just press the keys.
Mm-hmm.
And
right.
This is fascinating about these new children. They're harder to program, and I believe that's deliberate, because until we realize we're multidimensional and we start to embrace that side of ourselves, which many shut down, and I'm sure you know what I mean by that, Chaylin. So many of the older generations I meet, and I think this has been going on for numbers of generations. I'm meeting 70 and even 80-year-olds that have had experiences, and they've been devastated trying to manage their awareness right from when they were small and being told it's not real, this is your imagination and what have you. And to say, that one of the ladies, I got a beautiful letter from her where she ordered my book, and she's in her late 70s, and she's a beautiful soul that lives in Queensland. And she wrote to me and said, initially it was all overwhelming even to look at the book. But she said, when I finally looked at a page, she said, I burst into tears, because it was just tears of joy that at last, this is being written about. This is being something she'd experienced all her life and had denied, and most of the time, most people don't want to hear it or don't believe it. So for her, it was a joyous thing to finally read that this is her experience.
That's wonderful. I think removing that feeling of isolation that a lot of people feel is going to just create a huge expansion. It's very, very exciting. So we talked a little bit about kind of the physiological or sensorial changes that a lot of your clients have experienced after even recalling their extraterrestrial and extra-dimensional experiences. Have you noticed anything else? Like, does it help when a person starts going to have a regression or a number of regressions from you? Have you noticed that other aspects of their health improve? Do you feel like, have you noticed, like, has anyone had any kind of chronic type of symptom, like migraines or body aches or anything like that? Have you observed that? Have there been any changes in their physiological makeup?
It's a good question, and I don't always get asked so much about the process of how I work, which I've sort of got my own name for it, because it is a multidimensional kind of operation, if you like, in terms of how I work with hypnosis. Because like you, I'm tapped into that other side of myself, my intuition. As a healer and doing Reiki, you tune into people, you tune into their energies and what have you. And what I call the way that I work is it's multidimensional infinite information in a super conscious trance state. And what that really means is it's an interaction between two consciousnesses, if you like. So what I'm looking at when I first ask someone, what is it that you want to understand? What are the answers that you're seeking? So first, consciously, we're having a dialogue about what does that person that's conscious about their experiences want to know. And while I'm doing that, then I also know there'll be more that their subconscious and superconscious wants to say. And I allow for that process to happen during the trance state. So we're looking at answers. We're asking the subconscious, superconscious to help us find those answers. Which avenue do we need to go in? What door do we need to go through to find those answers and have that dialogue to find out what's actually been going on? But with that, I can also look at things that maybe have been programmed over the years, either in this life or some other time, and we call them past lives.
Sure.
That is preventing someone from moving forward, whether it's in healing or it's emotional, or it's, that some call them energetic implants. Is there anything? And you can get them to look at that with their subconscious, superconscious, and say, is there anything you're holding on to that isn't useful to you anymore, that's stopping you moving forward? And they will often very easily say, oh, it's in my heart, or it's in my neck, or it's in my head, or whatever. Right, well, let's see now whether or not that can be released and working with their healer self or their inner wisdom, you can often work through clearing that. Because all the time, what I'm doing, and I know, Chaylin, you understand this, I'm working with their higher awareness, their superconscious, to say, okay, we're in this space now, what do we need to do to make the changes so that this person can move forward, integrate what's happening, and be the best they can be in terms of their awareness and understanding. And it's amazing what that can do. They can isolate different programs, just any kind of energy program that's not useful to them. Sometimes they'll actually discover it is useful and they want to hang on to it because you can talk to that part of them. You can get answers. And also, you can talk to the superconscious. You can say, right, I want to talk to the superconscious now. Is there anything else you want the conscious person to know that they're not aware of? So you can have that dialogue. So the whole time you're working with that consciousness that person is on a multi-level, so that you are able to look at this from a very holistic perspective that enables them to open up even more. And when I complete that, I will also say now that as you're ready, you're going to be more open to more information as you're ready for it, when you're ready to integrate it in that kind of holistic way. So you're putting in, extra, if you like, possibilities for the superconscious to be able to access the conscious and work in concert with them, because we shut down so much from our intuition, our awareness, our feeling, our knowing, our, that inner understanding, because we taught not to trust it. It's not reliable, when in fact it's more reliable than our logical analytical side, because it actually is multidimensional rather than just linear.
Interesting. Yeah, I always wonder when, if I encounter a client or a patient that has some kind of a chronic physical symptom, I feel that there's a real intelligence behind that that has to do with communication. And I think that what you had just described in your process, how you work with people, I think that kind of hits the nail on the head, that our physical selves can be sort of speaking to us, sometimes through the channel of a constant chronic nagging kind of pain. And then, through searching and through that pain, you're like, okay, I need to transform this. It can open a door to healing. So I appreciate that you look at healing from a holistic perspective, for sure. I did want to talk a little bit about, in your book, in The New Human, you do bring up that really what the seed to our potential is sort of stored in everyone's DNA. And I think a lot of people are talking about DNA in a different way now, which is exciting. How do you feel, from your own research, your investigations and observations, how does DNA, or does it evolve? I think you alluded to that earlier, but what are some of your thoughts about these new children coming in? And you talked about children coming in with ADHD and Asperger's, or being diagnosed as that anyway. What's behind all of this in terms of our DNA?
It's a very good question, and I do go into some depth on multiple levels about the DNA, because I think that is the key. First of all, we do know that many of these non-human intelligences are very interested in our DNA, and the DNA samples are taken. So there's something very intrinsically important there. But I feel like we have to tell a bit of the story for people to understand what's behind their interest in the DNA. And ultimately, everybody who says, what's their agenda? What's it all about? Are we just lab rats? All these kinds of things. We have to look back into our history and know that we are not told the truth about our true origins, even to how old we are as a civilization, for example. Mm-hmm. And what has been fascinating for me is when you hear from geneticists that don't necessarily come out with it publicly, saying that there is evidence of intelligent design. Now, we have 223 genes in our DNA that are a sideways insertion of genetic material, all to do with higher psychological functioning. Nobody can say how they got there, for example.
Right.
So we're going into, okay, so there's an anomaly there. Lots of the public don't know there's an anomaly. And how is it, that we went from Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon and suddenly we get twice the brain size and, more intelligent, et cetera, et cetera. There's only one way that can happen if we're being modern about it and not too religious, is to say this has happened because somehow or other we've been assisted to evolve into Homo sapiens sapiens. Now, the other point that I make very clearly, and if the ancient aliens is one example, is the gods. And I mention the gods with a little g rather than a big G, because I believe that many of those that are being worshipped as gods and still are in fact extraterrestrials. And I go into why I believe that's the case. When you've got a lot of evidence now to show in drawings, in paintings, religious paintings, you see UFOs. You'll see a whole range of cave drawings, hieroglyphs with UFOs in them and what have you. So UFOs have been with us. They've been with us from the beginning. We know they're interacting with us. We know that they're part of this, what I call this intelligent design of Homo sapiens. So you've got all of that as a background to, okay, so they're interested in genetics. So then what's the next step that goes with that? And what we hear is that we only use, 3 to 5% of our DNA. The rest is non-coding. It's called junk DNA. That says, well, why? Why are we only operating with, this small percentage of our DNA? What's the rest for? Why are we only using 1/10 of our brain capacity? What's the other 9/10 for? Potential for something within humans. And what has come through with everything that I'm learning now is that we appear to be being slowly activated, or that DNA is being activated. And the evidence of that, and I talk about this in my presentations, is that the children that are coming through seem to have expanded abilities. And, I'm hearing this from those that have ADHD, to Asperger's, to dyslexia, to some forms of autism. A lot of the autistic children appear to be telepathic. There's been, research to show that. So what's going on here? Those that are being activated as adults, and I talk about that as well, there are many people over the last few years that have gone from a very 3D life to being completely changed into a completely different kind of life. And one of them I mentioned in The New Human is a medical doctor who went from being a 3D medical doctor, having this activation, and then now working with what she believes is activating DNA. And, Dr. Marie Batchelor talks about how she does that, how she understands that she's working with frequencies to activate people and activate their DNA. Now, the other thing that I want to say about DNA, which is not fully understood by mainstream, or at least the information doesn't get out there, is there's been Russian research done to show that DNA is more than we think it is. In other words, it has a capacity, it's holographic in nature, and it has a capacity to access other realities or other dimensions. In other words, it creates miniature wormholes into consciousness or into the hologram. So when you get insight, when you get feelings and knowings, when you get the precognitive vision or whatever, what you're doing is through your DNA, you're accessing through these miniature wormholes information. As you think of it, you're pulling that information in. Many of you, many of you will probably, notice that when you're very interested in something, that all of a sudden everything you look at, from your computer to the newspaper to what's on the television, may be on that similar theme. It's like you're putting out an intent, a frequency that is accessing that information or that awareness. So with that, what this holographic nature of our reality, we've got within us the ability to access consciousness, or what we call the holographic nature of consciousness itself. And that's how it's done, through the actual DNA itself, that these Russian researchers have discovered is part of the nature of DNA, as well as the fact that DNA can be also changed through human language, through frequency. And that's how we know that, things like affirmations, positive, responses to people, you feel better. Why do you feel better? Because you're actually changing the nature of how your DNA is responding. You're actually sending out a frequency that makes people feel better as well. So there is a really good, logical reason why this is happening. It's not airy-fairy. It's actually very much of the quantum hologram. So getting back to the DNA, the understanding may be that what we have within us, as it gets activated more and more, we can access information, awareness, and these children are coming in with a lot more of, they're already activated. They're coming in without the programs. So they're coming in open to their multidimensional nature. When I talk about the children, for example, they're telling me that they remember their past lives. They'll mention to their mother or one to their granny, don't you remember, Granny, when we were on this planet together? And now we're on the planet Earth. And this is conscious recall, where they're talking about where they're actually from. And also why they've come here. Some of them are very aware of their abilities. I was talking to a little 7-year-old less than a week ago, telling me that he connects to his angels and he goes out of body, and explained to me that he goes to his planet of origin, where he's even drawn what he looks like when he goes out of body, explaining that he's come here to connect people to their angels. He sees them around himself all the time. Now, this is what I mean about the children and their awareness.
Oh, it's so high. Now, would you, just from what I'm gathering, do you think that everyone up to this point, in our modern history, humans at this point, their DNA is fully capable but simply programmed or locked, and that the children coming in simply are more unlocked, that their DNA is more open and available to them? Is that right, or is it a little different than that?
I think that definitely they're coming in more unlocked. Well, let's put it like this. I believe they have been orchestrated to not be so easily programmed, and that's why we've got, these different so-called dysfunctions, ADHD, etc. So it's, in other words, I believe that they've been assisted to have a different brain map. And because of that, this enables them to be and stay more open. One of the lovely books was written by Neil Gold, a gentleman in Hong Kong, who found out he was ADHD when he was in his 50s. And he gave me the very first clue to how they're different, because he said he'd always, finding out he was ADHD was no surprise, because he said, Mary, I always saw reality differently. I saw it in a far more complex way than I was told or shown on this planet. And he said, he wrote the book Close Encounters of the ADHD Kind. And it explains his ADHD in these terms: always dialed into higher dimensions. Yeah. So that to me is how he's understood his abilities. So they are open to their multidimensional nature. They're harder to program into 3D, and I believe that's deliberate, because I think these intelligences realize that once you come to this planet, if you're not careful, very quickly you shut down. Yes. And many adults have done that because they told it's not real, or stop making up stories, stop telling porky pies and and whatever. And gradually that awareness gets shut down, and they then get into this 3D box. Whereas these new ones coming in, because they're wired differently, seen as a dysfunction, which they're not, because they're wired differently, they're harder to program. But what do we do on this planet? We get the ADHDs and we stick Ritalin down their face to shut them down and slow them down so they get programmed. But, ultimately, they're the ones, these are all the new ones, the Asperger's. They are able to access so much more. We have a problem with them because they don't socialize in the way we think they should. Although one Asperger said, look, I have no problem socializing with my own kind. But he said, all of these programmed humans do. They come through as masks that aren't authentic. They're not real. They're not the truth. And we can't abide that. We don't want to be part of that. So they're seeing beyond the mask. So when you start to see what the gift is, then you realize what is so positive about these new programs. And we're the ones that need activation. We're the ones that need to wake up to our greater reality and let go of the old beliefs that limit us. There's this 9-year-old Kathy, I call her in the book, where she said to me, human beings are incredibly amazing, so amazing, she said, but they've got to believe it first.
Right.
And it's the belief that we're programmed into, that we're no good at anything, we can't do things, we've got to get degrees and we've got to get pieces of paper to say how good we are.
Right.
The whole time we're being told that we're inadequate in our society. And that is what we are brought up with, is our inadequacies and what we need to be successful in this 3D world, which of course is a very limiting and limited program.
I think that, Kathy is touching upon the power of belief and thought. Now, from what I understand, the frequency of thought is faster than the speed of light. So we really have it within ourselves to make huge transformations just by what we think. And beliefs, are thoughts that we kind of repeat over and over, or are instilled within us over and over a period of time. So really, what I see is that what the older generations can do, aside from supporting the younger generations and really listening to them and, looking at new ways to provide learning and education that isn't necessarily a prescribed public school system kind of format. But one thing we can do is, I think, begin to watch and observe our own thoughts, and then over time help to transform ourselves so that we can expand our own DNA. That's what I think that's what's needing to happen now. But what are some other inspiring things that you have witnessed and written about with the children coming in? What are some interesting things? I know there's one child that you've worked with that she says she has the ability to heal water, for example. If you could talk a little bit just about, some of the gifts that the children are coming in with, some of their motivations and their paths. I would be really interested to share that with the listeners.
It's a very good question, and that's what gives me hope for our future and our planet, is these new children coming in with their gifts and with their awareness. 9-year-old Kathy, the reason that her mother contacted me was because she'd seen a presentation where there were people speaking what we call the light languages, or star languages, or universal language, language of light. There's lots of different names. That people after contact can often start articulating, or going into healing and start finding themselves articulating. She said that she speaks 3 star languages and one of them heals water. So she's aware that the frequency actually changes water. And of course, we've had evidence of that with that wonderful scientist Masaru Emoto, a Japanese scientist, who showed that prayer, intent, all these kinds of things can change the structure of water into a different form, for example. So the evidence is there that this works. But the other abilities are in terms of multidimensional, apart from, seeing spirits, seeing ETs, seeing energy fields, seeing emotion. They're aware that they're being taken, often off-world, both out of body as well as physically, to be taught, as one 8-year-old told me. She was taken to a planet where she was shown how to levitate and how to use access her abilities with her third eye, for example. She also told me that she controls one of the elements, which she says is the wind and clouds. She says other star children can control other elements as well. So we're talking about fascinating kinds of abilities, for example. Many of them are telepathic and can access your thoughts or what's going on. As one 13-year-old said at school that her biggest problem was with the teacher. She said a teacher may be saying things on one level, but she often said her thoughts are quite different and not very nice.
Right.
So we've got what they're telling us is we've really got to be authentic, and we've got to come completely from that authenticity, not just say, but also be what we're talking about. So this is really a challenge to us, older generations, to walk our talk.
Yes.
And because you hear a lot of teachers out there, metaphysical teachers, who are coming out with some beautiful information, but their lives are a mess. What that really is saying is they're not integrating what they're talking about, and often we must learn what we're teaching. So we've really got to be authentic with that. The children know that this planet needs changing. They are, some of them, as one young man in my book, Antonio, talks himself, says he's an Arcturian ambassador, and he speaks star language. He brings in symbols for healing, for example, and he said he's come in as an ecological engineer, which is to create an environment, habitat that is in harmony with the planet, for example. So they're very aware of everything is conscious, everything is sentient. One young lad the other day, the 7-year-old, told me he's been not just a human, but he's been animals as well. He explained, how he knew he'd been different animals as well as being human. Now that will confront some people who think that we don't incarnate into as in a humanoid kind of form. Well, actually, according to some of them, no, we don't. We've all evolved from different types of forms, many different forms we've experienced through our soul journeys and through experiences, what they don't. Many of them are aware of reincarnation, as I say, and the fact, he even mentioned how he chose this lifetime. And he said, it was almost like going through a database and saying, which lifetime do I want on a particular planet and what do I want to experience? So he was explaining to me what that was like, but very, very comfortable with it, very articulate about what's going on for him. Another young 9-year-old was telling me how he deals with lower entities that have he's learned how to deal with them. So now when he goes out of body at night, he goes when children are having nightmares or being affected by these lower entities, he deals with them. He also told me how to get rid of depression, the children have to realize they have to hang on to a positive thought for at least 10 or 15 minutes for that to, if you like, balance them out. He was explaining, in other words, therapy.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
We have the smart children. And these are children under 10 years old.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really amazing to think that how young these beings are, these children. They're so young and they have so much knowledge. And so are most of the children, since they're young at this point, are they doing their work more on a subtle level as opposed to working with groups of people at this point? What's kind of your understanding about how these children are able to do their work?
Well, they're certainly aware that they go out of body and are working on all those other levels as well. They've come in as this, I'm told, to teach us how to be. So that, when I've always looked at this possibility of a new kind of school where really the adults are taught by the children, what I'm really saying is we create the environment for them to do what they've come here to do and to teach us what we need to do to enable them to do what it is that they've come here to do. And they've come with all different kinds of mandates, from healing right through to ecology, to fixing the whole paradigm of 3D, into creating awareness of our own multidimensional nature and our abilities, and to help us wake up, the rest of us. And that's part of it too. The children have said to me, I've come to help my family wake up and to help the planet wake up as well. So they've got a huge mandate, but they are not children on one level. We have to remember they've come in as the gurus to the adults, not the other way around.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Do you feel like a lot of indigenous cultures have kind of worked in this way for a long time? I mean, if you look at artwork by various indigenous cultures in what is now called the U.S., for example, or even in Australia, there's tellings of an understanding of things that we're talking about, moving between different dimensions and having visitations by other beings. It seems like it's been rooted in indigenous culture for a long time, and it's just with modern day culture, it's been very much squelched. Do you see that to be partially true?
Absolutely. I think that we've lost touch with, the indigenous culture's understanding, because we've always seen as we're the civilized ones, because we're scientific and, we are able to work everything out. In fact, they're the ones we need to listen to, because they know about their star brothers. Certainly, the North American Indians, the Aborigines, talk about the Wangina and the Mamu, which are the mantis beings. They know that they've been coming all through their history. They are tuned into nature. They're tuned into their multidimensional awareness. They don't dismiss it. They don't shut it down. They honor it and respect it. And, we have so much we have lost through this very, sadly, through going into this mechanistic scientific model that has basically shut Western society down. And the more programmed they are, of course, the harder it is for them to deprogram that and to actually trust their sensing, their feeling, their knowing. One of the main things that I do, and why I write and I've written the books, is almost to give people, if you like, permission to say, look, you're okay.
Yes.
Not because they want permission from me, but what I'm really doing by writing these stories is saying, look, there are others like you that also think they're alone, that think that it's just them. Well, actually, it's not. There are millions out there like you that feel alone, feel isolated, feel there's no one like them. And in the indigenous societies, they don't have that problem, but that we certainly do in our, so-called civilized Western culture. And it's time for us to wake up and realize what's happened and to realize our potential. And this is what the children are showing us, and this is what we're waking up to. People are being activated left, right, and center from all echelons of society. I talk to lawyers, doctors, nurses, social workers, policemen, clinical psychologists, psychiatrists, right across the board. That are being activated and realizing that the old model is inaccurate and isn't working, and that it's, that we are so much more aware and have the potential to do so much to change and turn everything around in this society.
It's so great. So we have about 9 minutes or so left. And so before we get to the end, I really wanted to make sure that we could hear a little bit about, you're going to be traveling to the U.S. So I'd love just to hear a little bit. It sounds like you're going to be going on a tour. And I would love to have the listeners find out a little bit about where a couple of the venues where you might be, and some of the subjects you're going to be covering. And then also I would love it if you could share your website and also where people could purchase your books.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I've got two websites. One is obviously www.acern.com.au or maryrodwell.com.au. I've also got a Facebook page where I mention what I'm actually doing. I am doing a tour. I'm leaving on. I'm going to be in Sedona for a week, and I'm actually speaking at the Awareness Life Expo, which is in Cottonwood, Arizona. If anyone's interested and wants to come on the 13th, 14th, and 15th of October. I also am doing a talk at the Arlington Institute in West Virginia and on the 21st of October, which is Transition Talks. From that, I'm going to Miami, where I'm speaking with, this is the first free conference, free being the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Experiences, where Dr. Burks, a PhD medical doctor, is speaking as well, and also Dr. Robert Davis, who's a neuroscientist, is speaking. And that's going to be on October the 29th at the Legion Park Activities Building. So if you go to experiencer.org, the information's there. I'm speaking in Boston, but as yet I haven't got all the details of Boston. And the final one is in Detroit, Awaken and Empowered Expo, which is on the 10th to 12th of November. That's at awakenedempoweredexpo.com. So those are the different venues that I'm speaking. Boston's still to be decided, but my main aim really is to start getting people to realize this isn't about bright lights in the sky. This is about our interactions with our ancestors, with those that have put in to human DNA their own DNA, and that we are waking up to that fact that we're part of them. And it's talking about the fact that this is raising consciousness, raising our awareness so that we can become part of a galactic community is the way that I see this. And talking about the children are the ones that are leading the way. So if you're interested in how to understand the children, many of you have written to me, parents and as well as educators, that are saying we notice the children are different. We know we have to do something differently. And many of the teachers that have written to me are starseeds themselves. They recognize the children in the classroom. They know things have to change. And I talk about new tools to help the children, a new way with educating. And this is what is really important now for our future, is understanding the kids, listening to them and supporting them so they can come here and do what they've come here to do.
Now, from what I understand, at the Awake and Empowered Expo in Detroit, that is led by Ethan Fox. Is that correct? Is he one of the organizers? Now, he is starting to try to form a type of learning platform for these children. Is that correct?
Yes, he's very, very interested. And there is something that is being done which is called EOV, Extraocular Vision, or ICU Academy in England, and also facilitated by two ladies from Canada. And this shows children how to expand their consciousness in a way they can see without physical sight. And we had the very first course here in Australia, in my little hometown here in Agnes, where I was seeing children just over 6 to 12, actually within even their first few lessons, being able, I've got video of a little young girl literally colouring in and reading with, if you like, this blindfold on, using her consciousness to actually see. It's absolutely, and I've got video of that I'm going to be showing at these conferences. So it's a new way, it's new tools to help these children expand their consciousness, and I'll be showing video of them and the children talking about their experiences.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I do recall seeing a video of a school, I believe it was in India, so I don't know if some of these teachings were sort of derived from this school in India working with young children. They were blindfolded. And I think they were developing, it's sort of like in the science of Ayurveda, developing their Ajna chakra, so their third eye, so they're able to see without using their eyes. And they can actually also use their hands to see, because we have chakras in our hands as well. Is it similar? Do you think that the teachings are derived from some schools in India, or is that not familiar to you?
I think that it's India's one way of doing it. This was done. This was taught initially to these facilitators in Mexico in the extraocular vision there, but they've developed their own protocols now. If you like, what this is allowing is giving certain tools which you can expand on intuitively with yourself. I mean, it can be taught to adults too, but children are a lot more receptive, 6 to 12-year-olds. It is incredible how one lady that was here had a dyslexic son that was who was struggling to read, but when he was shown how to use his other sight, his consciousness, she was in tears with emotion because he was able to read fluently with these blindfold, with the blindfold on. So in other words, through his consciousness, he could actually read fluently, but he couldn't with his physical sight. This is the kind of thing that children are showing they can do almost naturally and so quickly and easily within a few sessions of being taught how to do it, to expand their consciousness. And this is, so I think there are various places where this is being done, and I suspect it's being done in other countries as well, although you may not have heard of it. I know Russia's got one big program like this, and China's another one. So we know it can be done. It's just, what are the protocols to help children expand? And this is one of them, which is absolutely fascinating. And it gives them so much confidence in all these other abilities where they can see 360 degrees, for example, and can sense and feel energies, even talk to other forms of life, as well, such as, plants and animals and this kind of thing. It sounds extraordinary, but it is what some of these children are finding they can do.
That's wonderful. So positive. So with that, I think we're close to the end. I just want to thank you so much for coming on today's podcast and just sharing your information and insight. And I hope that some of our listeners can make it out to all of the wonderful events that you have scheduled in the U.S. And for the listeners that are living in Australia, you'll have to visit Mary's site and see when you can go to her presentations, or, I really do encourage people to purchase her books. The New Human, which is her most recent book, is just really a delight because it combines both research and accounts of some of these bright lights that are coming into the world. So Mary, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure, Gillian, and you asked some wonderful questions. So thank you so much for putting this information out there. And without you and those like you, I wouldn't have a chance to perhaps share. So you're doing a wonderful job. Thank you so much.